So I have a truck camper. Um, it's an old Coachman. It's like a 9.5, 9.5 feet, and it has these manual jacks on it. And because you can only crank one at a time, and because you can only crank it a little bit, maybe one turn, um, it actually takes about an hour to load that. And I found that out when I bought it. I just started wailing on one. I started really cranking one of the jacks, and actually moved the foot over so much that it come off the block that it was on, and the thing fell. It was half on the truck and half off the truck. We were able, of course, to get it back on, and I had to do some repairs and some braces and stuff. But so you can only turn these jacks, these manual jacks, about one turn, maybe two turns. Then you have to walk around to the other one, and it's a big, long, tedious process to jack it up enough to get it off the camper. I looked online for the power jacks. They make these in their electric and their remote control. They are ridiculously expensive, $1,600–1,700, which is kind of ridiculous to put on $1,700 worth of jacks on a $3,000 camper. I looked at the conversion kits that just replace the power head on these things, and that's $1,400. So I'm not going there either. What I originally planned on doing was some sort of a steady lift or stable lift setup using these guys here. They'll actually extend 16 inches, and with the framework of the steady lift, the stable lift under the camper, that would be okay. But I decided I really didn't want to haul all that extra weight around from that steel, and they're not quite as stable as they claim to be. So I came up with the idea of actually taking the power head off of this guy and putting it on that guy. It's not going to be a bolt-on operation. There's a flange on each end of that guy, and I'm not even sure I can do it. I'll have to take them apart and look and see what the mechanisms and the mounting plates are going to be like. So anyway, the plan is going to be to take that apart, take this apart, and see what I'm going to need to do to put a power head on there. It will fit with this mounted on the camper. There's just enough room if I remove these bulbs for the power head to sit there without extending it out any further. I'm probably going to have to weld an adapter plate on here or do something. I'm not sure. This is probably an Acme screw. This is probably an Acme screw. I don't know the shaft size. It's probably similar. I'll have to take it apart and look at it. Also, one other thing to consider is this is supposed to be rated for 3,500 pounds. The camper weighs probably 3,000 pounds. Most of the weight's going to be on the front. So I'll have to do a proof of concept without doing any irreversible changes to this guy to make sure that this thing can actually lift the camper. What do you think, a 6? Yay, it's 6. You see that? That's about a 3/4 Acme screw with a bolt through bolted here on this coupler, and it looks like it's got a thrust bearing here, and yeah, that should be fairly easy to. And this goes down pretty easy and then pops off there, so that should be fairly easy to duplicate depending on what that guy is. So let's take a look, see what this guy is. Alright, so this is just a pinion gear here, and it looks like it has a drift pin. Nice grease there. It's a 1-to-1 pinion gear. Looks like a drift pin here to drift pin here, so I should be able to just knock that pin out, and should be able to access the top of that. No, the pin's the only thing holding this thing together. I'll be able to access the top of the Acme screw in here, and since it's just a drift pin, I should be fairly easy to do a little pipe, a cylinder with a hole for this drift pin and a hole for this bolt over here, and I will probably mount this guy right up here on top, put a plate up here, and just have a little short piece of pipe with holes 90 degrees off from each other, so that kind of like a universal joint. And should be fairly easy to do. I can just mount it up here. I think it's all the force from the power head is going to be torque. Okay, as you can see, I cut the plate off the stem of the power jack. I didn't want to mess with machining one of these, and I'm not going to be using that for anything anyway, so it's essentially scrap. Normal conditions on a project like this, I would do all of them at once, but I'm not completely sure that the power head is going to have enough power to lift the camper up, so I need to do a prototype and test it on the camper to make sure that it can lift it up. I just got this tacked on here right now. As you can see, I had to bend this a little bit to get it straight lined up here. Generally speaking, if you look down at the sight down, you can see that it's pretty straight. I'm sure it's off, you know, 1/4 of a millimeter or 1/2 a millimeter or something, but it's really not going to be an issue, because when I come from here, this is going to be a fairly loose fit, and then this will be a fairly loose fit, and the pivot, the pins, the drift pin and the bolt over here will be 90 degrees opposed to each other on the adapter shaft, and what that'll give me is it'll act as a U-joint, and I can be slightly aligned, so that is going to work good. I need to machine an adapter here. I may put another couple spots on here to make it strong enough to actually bolt this down to it and take some measurements. Need to measure how deep this is, and then measure from here to the bottom of this here, and I'm going to put that washer back on here. So from here down to the top of this washer, and then I will take the 1-inch stock I've got over there and cut it and machine it down to be a prototype adapter. And yeah, I'm going to put 2 more spots on this guy. I'm not going to do a complete weld, I'm just going to spot it up. That should be strong enough for prototype test. I don't think it's going to twist off with a bunch of spots. I may just weld it all the way while I got it here. But anyway, I'm gonna weld this the rest of the way, I guess, and then I'm going to build a prototype adapter for this, and then I will go hook it up to a battery on the camper and see if it will actually lift the front of the camper. If it lifts the front of the camper, back a ways left, so we're good. As you saw, this works pretty good. A couple things I wanted to go over. If you look closely, you'll see that it's not perfectly aligned. It wasn't intentional, of course, but it's difficult to make it perfectly aligned. But since this here and this here are 90 degrees off from each other, it acts as a universal joint, and it doesn't have to be perfectly aligned. So I'm very happy with that. I did learn a couple of things. This pin right here that I took out on this one, I don't need to take out, because the bevel gear will just pop off as soon as I get the other gear off the top of it. So I'll leave that on the other 3. Now that I have the dimensions fairly close, I can duplicate these dimensions For drilling this hole, I got a bit that exactly fits inside the hole that was already there, and I just started from both sides with it on here. You saw me drill one side, then flip it over and drill another side, only about 1/8 inch deep, and that was so that it wouldn't wander and go. And I put it on the vise and drilled it halfway through, flipped it over, drilled it halfway through the other side, so that they met. If there's any misalignment, it's going to be in the center. That actually worked pretty good. This fit right in there. This does run it down. It's a little slower than I was liking, but I guess that just means it's going to have more torque. Tomorrow I'll do a temporary install of this on the camper, or I'll install it on the camper, and then run it down just to make sure that it's going to have enough oomph to lift the front of the camper. And if it does, then over the next week I will do the rest of these. I'm going to actually paint this thing black so it matches the power head. I'll have to cap off one of these, move this fuse, some of the sprockets are loose, so a couple other things. But proof of concept, it seems to be working pretty good. One other thing I may do when I assemble the other ones, when I weld this plate on, I will machine these guys first, put it in there with this cap on, and then spot weld one side to hold everything in place. Pull these screws out, and then it'll be held pretty much exactly where it needs to be already, and I can it'll be, the alignment will be a little bit better. It's not going to matter for this one, you know, this duty cycle, you know, it may in its entire life go up and down 100 times, so it's not really a big deal. I'll spray some WD-40 in there. I'm going to cap off this open area. I think for now I'm just going to run some tape around it and paint it, probably some aluminized tape, and that way if I ever need to get in there for any reason, I just rip the tape off. So pretty good. That's it for this week. Next week I will do the other 3 adapters and clean these up and install them, clean up the head and install these on the camper.